With the long walk in theaters, I figured, hey, what better time than now to do a deep dive into one of the best Stephen King film adaptations ever made. And no, I'm not talking about The Shining. Yet. Today, we're talking about Rob Reiner's Misery from 1990, a film that somehow manages to be funny, terrifying, claustrophobic, and weirdly cozy all at once. Here are 7 things you never knew about Misery. So the movie kicks off with Paul Sheldon, played by the late great James Caan. He's a romance novelist, best known for writing The Adventures of Misery Chastain, a Victoria-era soap opera heroine that he's completely burnt out on, and he's just finished a brand new, completely original novel intended to take him out of the misery business forever. Paramore pun. He celebrates its completion at a snowy Colorado lodge, lights up his finished-a-book cigarette, and heads off into a blizzard. Spoiler, not the best driving conditions. Obviously, Paul's car wipes out during the snowstorm and he is saved by Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, in what might be the greatest breakout performance in cinema history ever. I mean, it was her first on-screen appearance and her first Oscar, which is just completely unheard of. Annie seems like a nice lady at first. She seems like a genuinely caring person trying to help a man recover from 2 broken legs. She even keeps calling herself his #1 fan, which is adorable. Until it very much isn't. Before we get into Annie crushing ankles, let's talk casting. Kathy Bates was not the obvious Hollywood choice at the time because she was mostly a stage actress. She was completely unknown to mainstream film audiences, which is honestly kind of hard to believe now. Screenwriter William Goldman suggested her to director Rob Reiner, and she became their first and ultimately the right choice. But, fun fact, Anjelica Huston was originally cast before Bates until scheduling got in the way. Bette Midler also turned it down because she thought the script was too violent, but later called herself stupid for doing so. Other names on the list include Jessica Lange, Barbra Streisand, Roseanne Barr, and even Rosie O'Donnell. Could you imagine Rosie O'Donnell swinging that sledgehammer? It's a completely different movie. Thankfully, Bates won out and nailed it, so much so that she won the Oscar that year for Best Actress, the first ever given to a woman in a horror thriller role. A huge achievement that hasn't really been repeated since Natalie Portman in 2010. Paul quickly starts to realize that Annie isn't getting him any help. She isn't calling a hospital, she isn't talking to the cops, she's lying to him and keeping him prisoner. And when Annie finds out that Paul killed off Misery in his latest book, let's just say she doesn't take it well, like at all. Like Rian Johnson killing Luke Skywalker bad. Now, you might think James Caan was always the obvious pick to play Paul. Nope. Every mainstream actor in Hollywood got sent this thing. We're talking Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, Richard Dreyfuss, Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Robin Williams, Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson, Bill Murray. The list is endless. So why did they all say no? Screenwriter William Goldman once said, "Leading men hate to be passive. They hate to be euthanized by their female co-stars." Translation: the leading men of Hollywood didn't want to get bossed around by Kathy Bates, and honestly, that's their loss. Caan finally took over the role after the great Jack Nicholson officially said no. Funnily enough, Caan had already passed on Nicholson's role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest years earlier, which also, funnily enough, involved an Oscar-winning performance by a terrifying nurse. And here's your first bonus fun fact of the day. Caan and Bates didn't exactly hit it off behind the scenes. Caan hated rehearsing, preferring the spontaneity of first takes, while Bates, being a stage veteran, wanted to rehearse everything to death. Rob Reiner, being the crafty director that he is, told Bates to just funnel that frustration into Annie's hostility towards Paul, and judging by how convincing she was, maybe she didn't have to dig too deep. Paul's misery while recovering starts to escalate, as Annie makes him burn his brand new script in retaliation for killing off her beloved character Misery, and she wants a new book, one where they resurrect Misery like she's some Winchester brother. While she's away getting paper and ink and all that shit to write the new book, Paul tries to escape. He finds this weird fake phone, a bunch of weird shit, and he knocks over the Chekhov's gun of all Chekhov's guns when it comes to tchotchkes, the ceramic penguin. Stephen King is famously picky about his adaptations. I'm looking directly at you, Kubrick. But after seeing Rob Reiner's Stand By Me, adapted from King's novella The Body, he was so impressed he basically made it a condition. Misery only happens if Reiner's in the director's chair. Sure, other names were floated around, like George Roy Hill from The Sting, but King had tunnel vision for Reiner, and Reiner wasn't just phoning it in. He saw himself in Paul Sheldon. He said the story resonated because it's about a man who is trapped by his own success and is desperately trying to break out and establish himself in a different way. For Reiner, that mirrored how he felt after All in the Family, trying to break out of comedy and prove himself in a different lane, and this made him very nervous. And it also made the studio very nervous as well. So to prep, he binge studied Alfred Hitchcock films until he practically earned a minor in suspense, and it clearly worked. Extra bonus fun fact, in true Hitchcock fashion, he even gave himself a cameo as the helicopter pilot. Eventually, Annie finds out that Paul has been sneaking around, so she drugs him, ties him down, and introduces him and us to one of the most infamous horror scenes ever put to film. If you've seen Misery, you know the scene. Since Paul's legs are mostly healed from the accident at this point, Annie decides to change that by putting a block of wood between his ankles and smashing them with a sledgehammer. It's one of those moments that's so brutal, so cringe-inducing, it's burned into your brain whether you want it there or not. So how did they pull it off without actually breaking James Caan's ankles? The effects team K&B Effects built a stunt bed with hidden holes to hide Caan's real legs and then strapped prosthetic ones over the top made of gelatin and PVC pipes with hinges in the ankles. The fake legs were velcroed to his real ones under his sweatpants, so the illusion looks seamless right up until crack.
Jesus Christ.
Kathy Bates really swings a genuine sledgehammer here because the weight and speed of the rubber one completely broke the illusion. Which meant, for safety, Caan had to slip out of the bed during close-ups. But still, the effect is incredible, and watching it really makes you feel the impact. After a screening, the story goes that Caan turned to Rob Reiner and said, "You're a sick fuck," which, let's be real, is about the highest praise you can get as a horror director. Not everyone was enjoying it though. Bates reportedly cried before and after filming the scene, which honestly is fair. Swinging a sledgehammer at your coworker's ankles isn't exactly the most feel-good day at work.
Annie, whatever you're thinking about doing, please don't do it.
From here, Paul keeps plotting. He even almost poisons Annie while they're having dinner together, but she gets so lucky and spills a glass of wine, which crushes him, but he doesn't give up. When she leaves later again, he escapes one more time and goes through her scrapbook, where you find out, surprise, she's been killing people for years. But not just killing people, killing children. Yuck. Kathy Bates and Rob Reiner worked together to create the background for Annie's character, coming up with personal trauma and stories not shown on screen to help inform and explain her history of killing vulnerable people entrusted to her care. Annie's backstory is partly inspired by Janine Jones, a Texas nurse who murdered dozens of children in the 70s and 80s, and in 1985, Jones was sentenced to 99 years in prison for her murders. Good, fuck you. Anyways, Stephen King based Annie on her, creating a character who could be terrifying while also being sad and oddly sympathetic. King has even said that Annie was his favorite character to write, specifically because she's so unpredictable. One minute she's feeding Paul soup and the next she's taking a sledgehammer to his ankles. That unpredictability also helped her land on AFI's top 100 villains list, right up there with Hannibal Lecter. Meanwhile, the local sheriff, played by Richard Farnsworth, starts piecing things together, and he eventually finds Paul in Annie's basement, but before he can save him, Annie shoots him with a shotgun, which officially makes her the worst bed and breakfast host in Colorado. If you think this movie is brutal, trust me, the book is way worse in classic Stephen King fashion. In the novel, Annie chops off Paul's foot with an axe and cauterizes the wound like Merle Dixon. Later, she lops his thumb off with an electric carving knife and serves it to him on a birthday cake. Yeah, fun times. Interestingly though, they also filmed the scene from the book where Annie runs over a state trooper with a lawnmower, but Rob Reiner cut it, feeling it kind of flipped the story into a dark comedy rather than suspense. And Kathy Bates reportedly wished it had stayed in. Even then, test audiences hated that Paul walked normally at the end, so they had to reshoot it with him limping and using a cane. Hollywood is always finding ways to make things slightly more depressing. In the climax of the film, however, Paul sets his new Misery Returns manuscript on fire, baiting Annie into a fight. They tumble around the room, bashing each other with typewriters, champagne bottles, burnt paper, whatever's at hand, and finally, Paul kills Annie. Cut to 18 months later, Paul's in New York, haunted by visions of Annie popping up in public, still declaring that she's his #1 fan. There are some crazy coincidences with this book and Stephen King's real life, because years later, after the book and the movie were published in 1999, Stephen King was hit by a van while walking down the road in Maine. For a while there, it was reported that he had actually died, which is eerily similar to Paul Sheldon's crash. And like Paul Sheldon the character, King also had to write through the pain of recovery. And here's one last bonus fun fact for the road. Paul's typewriter in the movie is missing the letter N key. And this moment is inspired by King's own first typewriter that also had a busted key, though his was the letter E, which, if you've ever tried writing anything, is basically the worst key you could lose. That's everything I've got on Rob Reiner's Misery, but please leave a comment down below if I missed anything, and also leave a like on the video. If you enjoy what I do here, it really helps let YouTube know it needs to show my videos to more wonderful people like you. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to Nostalgia Mode for more entertainment-related videos. Until next time, bye.